Patrick McCaffery has entered the transfer portal. That's right. The coach's son has entered the transfer portal. What does it say about Iowa basketball? We break down the Iowa football depth chart, and the women get ready for the Sweet 16 all today. Locked on Hawkeyes.
You are Locked on Hawkeyes, your daily podcast on the Iowa Hawkeyes. Part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, welcome in. I'm Trent Condon, and this is the Locked on Hawkeyes podcast. Thanks for making Locked on Hawkeyes your first listen every day. We're available wherever you find podcasts. You can also find us on YouTube. While you're there, make sure you hit the subscribe button. Helps us get in front of more Hawkeye fans. This episode is brought to you by Nissan. Are you the kind of driver that likes to push things a little further? Ever wonder what adventure could be around the next corner? Take the Nissan Rogue, Nissan Pathfinder, or Nissan Armada and go find your next big adventure. Check them all out at nissanusa.com. Well, let's get into it today. We got some hoops news. We got some football. We got women's basketball all at the forefront here on your Thursday edition of Locked on Hawkeyes. Kick things off first, and let's jump into the news from today. No surprise, I don't think, Patrick McCaffery entering the transfer portal, but because of, obviously, the relationship with the head coach, being the coach's kid, this has created some angst. This has created some questions about the future of the program, the future of Fran McCaffery. Does this mean something else? Is he out there searching for other jobs? A lot of speculation that has come out of this. But we knew throughout the course of this season that this was going to be it for Patrick McCaffery. He has stated in no uncertain terms that this was his final go-around. He said it multiple times. Fran McCaffery said it multiple times. So it was a bit surprising to me, and it shouldn't surprise me. People on social media not understanding the story, but there was plenty of that out there when the announcement came down. We talked about the rumor that was out there a few weeks ago about that Patrick was looking to transfer to Duke, go to a blue blood. Now, that seemed far-fetched at the time, and it certainly still does at this point in time after certainly the kind of season that Patrick had this year and what we've seen out of him the last couple of years. But that's not really the story here today. The story is about a young man that has had a difficult go of it. Watching Patrick in high school and watching him at Iowa City West and calling a couple of his games down at the state tournament, seeing him with the frame that he had at 6'9", good athletic ability, there was a hope as a top 100 player that he was going to really build him into something special. And it never materialized. Now, you thought maybe maturing just physically, a little more development was going to happen. We didn't know with the thyroid cancer that he had. That's a huge part of the story as well, and something that I think was a debilitating angle and something that we've talked about in the past. The anxiety pauses that he's had throughout the course of his career. There's been a lot. There's been injuries, there's been cancer, and there's been some poor play. And with all of that, Patrick put out a statement and just a weird angle to it. I'm sure it was just trying to probably have a joke and talking about his teammates and most of you, haha. Or was there something more there? It's just such a weird thing to put on your farewell note to your team and to your university to have that in there. But that aside, it didn't work as well as we wanted it to. And we saw Connor, and Connor had some deficiencies, but he was a leader. He was a guy that absolutely commanded respect. He was a guy that would say the things that need to be said in team sports. And we didn't get those same kind of things from Patrick. I think there's many reasons for that. A lot of times the oldest certainly has more of those kind of leading type of qualities. That could definitely be a piece of it. What Patrick went through in his youth, I think that's absolutely something that can be there too. But what we've seen out of him the last couple of years was certainly not what we hope could be a star at the Big Ten level. And you look at some of the numbers, this past season, Patrick finished the year with 5 offensive rebounds. 5 offensive rebounds in the year. At 6'9", he averaged 3.1 rebounds per game. It never worked. It never clicked. And then even with all those things on the hardwood, the story has so many different layers and so many different ways that it goes about it. And the unfortunate part is we can talk about him as a basketball player, but some of the other shots that are out there, I think are just completely unfair. And that's not just for Patrick McCaffery. I think that's across the board. And taking those kind of shots and just continually trying to pull him down. He wasn't good enough on the hardwood. And as a senior leader, we didn't see that there. We saw bad body language and we saw just some oddities that are there. And I think those are okay to talk about. But when it goes deeper than that, that's the unfortunate part. And this is not some indictment to the Iowa fan base because it's not alone, but it doesn't make it right. Hope that he is able to find a home that he can have the last season that he wants and put together either a great statistical year, maybe transfer down a level, or go to a blue blood, even if he's not playing. Go to a great team and just be able to experience it. Because what he's gone through, the way that he has persevered, it would be nice to see that guy be able to get something. And whatever that something is, and whatever that's something that he wants, it would be good to see that. The numbers for Iowa coming up this season are concerning. And certainly in the backcourt. As we talked about yesterday, every day, as you heard the conversation about that. When you go into a season with two guards in college basketball, for all intents and purposes, you're screwed. You just can't do it. What if an injury happens? What are you going to do? Play Price Sanford? Play Peyton Sanford as a point guard? What if Brock Hardy goes down? They have to do so much in the portal just to give themselves a shot. There's a ton of names out there. We're over 1,000 players now in the transfer portal. And there are plenty of good guards out there. To compete for the highest level guys, you got to pay. And as we talked about yesterday, that's going to be a huge component here. But there are plenty of talented guys that you can find to come in. You got to shoot higher than a Bakari Evelyn. You got to shoot higher than a Ben Krikke. That needs to happen if I was going to be back to the NCAA tournament. Tony Perkins is a bigger loss because there was that glimmer of hope that he would come back for another season. I don't think that I was going to be able to get a guard as good as Tony Perkins next season. You're going to need depth. I think the front court is fine. And certainly if Peyton Sanford returns, you're in really good shape there. Up front, you're good. You have to do that. But big picture, what's going to get this fan base back? There has to be something different defensively. And we see this happening with Kentucky right now. And Cal's owed over $30 million, and because of that, he's going to be back for another season. The fan base is pissed off about it, but that's going to be what's going to happen at Kentucky next year. And though completely different basketball programs we're talking about, Fran's going to be back as well. Unless he decides on his own accord that he is going to move on, he'll be back for next season. But if you go into the year with certainly question marks in the guard court, you go into a season next year with nothing changing what you're doing. Fran loves to talk basketball. And when you get him in those moments, he can be incredibly good, both in front of the media and in front of the fans. He just doesn't do it enough in my mind. And if he would come out and explain what they're going to do defensively, explain what they're going to try to do to get this defense fixed, and at least get it to just an average type of level in the Big Ten. It's a great product to watch because of how good they are offensively. But when you see the same song and dance, and you get blown out and you give up 90 against Utah to end the season, the same in the Big Ten tournament, and lose to a double-digit seed for the 6th time in the last 10 seasons in the Big Ten tournament, it's hard to wrap your mind around it as a fan, just saying, well, we're going to try it again. We'll see. Maybe this is the year we get a break. Maybe this is the year that the NCAA tournament seeding falls our way. Maybe. It's tough to get excited about that. It's easy to get excited about Iowa football, and we'll do that as we continue. The depth chart is here. We'll break it down and overreact to a piece of paper. That's what we do here. And, I know we're not alone. A quick look at the depth chart talks some Iowa football as we continue, and the Iowa women getting ready for the Sweet 16. We'll do that as we roll through here. This is Locked On Hawkeyes. This week's March Madness Bracket Highlight is brought to you by our friends at Nissan. Each week, we're picking one team that stands out, a team that's pushed it further than the rest. Just like any of the all-new 2024 Nissan SUVs, these guys were able to take it to the next level. The NC State Wolfpack are obviously this week's Nissan Rogue. The team absolutely surprised us all with a powerful performance in their 2 games in the tournament. Wins over Texas Tech and Oakland have set them up with a matchup in the Sweet 16 against Marquette. They say win life, go Rogue, and that's exactly what is happening with the Wolfpack. Take the Nissan Rogue, Nissan Pathfinder, or Nissan Armada and go find your next big adventure. Shop NissanUSA.com. That's NissanUSA.com. Today's episode is also brought to you by Bettor Together. Bettor Together is the first cooperative daily fantasy application. Bettor Together. It offers a familiar experience of existing daily fantasy sport players with the social twist. You can play with a friend or a teammate. You go out there, have the shared experience, an opportunity to connect with friends, connect with colleagues, people that just look at betting in the same way that you do. If your bracket's busted, you're tired of that same old grind, you want to try out Bettor Together. Play with your friends, not against them. Just pick more or less on real-time player stats. Strategize with your partner to boost your odds and climb the leaderboard together. Grab a friend and join the social DFS movement. Been playing this now for a couple of weeks, and it's been really fun to get into these NCAA tournament games, talk a little bit with some like-minded people in the space and see exactly what they're doing, and then try to work your way up the leaderboard as I'm trying to do right now. Bettor Together. Download Bettor Together now from the App Store and sign up using promo code LOCKEDON for a chance to win your share of over $1,000 in cash prizes. Remember the code LOCKEDON because winning alone is fun, but it's better together. Trent Condon back with you once again on the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast. Thanks for making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every day. All right, let's jump into some football. Talked a lot of football yesterday in the Kirk Ferentz press conference. Talked about some of the excitement about Tim Lester, the new offensive coordinator. And I don't want to say it's free reign because that would not be fair to say, but definitely Kirk, let it be known that this is going to be the offense of Tim Lester. And as we've seen, offensive coordinators at Iowa, you do have wiggle room. You have things that you can do better, and Iowa certainly has to fix a lot over there. So let's take a look at the depth chart. No surprise at the quarterback position, though he is working his way back from the ACL injury. Kirk Ferentz did mention in the press conference on Tuesday that he anticipates Cade McNamara will be back probably in June and be able to be a full go at this point. He is throwing the football around, just not able to do dropbacks, no cutting, anything like that, coming off the ACL. This one, though, did frustrate people. Seeing Deacon Hill listed as the backup quarterback, it's as simple as this. Deacon Hill cannot take a snap for this team this upcoming football season. The fan base is just absolutely out on him. We saw the most turnover-prone quarterback in all of college sports last year, how Kirk Ferentz continued to trot him out here. A guy that is just as against, nobody likes turnovers, I get that, but Kirk takes it to another level, and yet he kept trotting him out there, befuddling at the very least. Just quarterback play in general has been befuddling, and the inability for Kirk to pull the plug on quarterbacks, he's got to have some kind of blind spot when it comes to that. And there you have Marco Lainez listed as the third teamer, and you need to see now, Marco Lainez, if he has it, if he's got a chance, if Tim Lester believes that they can develop him into something, at minimum be a backup this year, and maybe a future starter, and if not, they got to go portal shopping again. Now, I was over the scholarship limit by 5-6 scholarships, something in that range. Saw Griffin Little has been placed on medical hardship, so that takes away a scholarship available, but they still have to trim some more. One of the spots that you'd anticipate possibly is going to see some defection after spring football is the running back position. And a year ago, it was an incredibly frustrating year for Caleb Johnson in terms of just raw skill set. He is as good as anybody, certainly in that room, and maybe as good as anybody that's come through at the running back position in Iowa in a long time. The size, power aspect that he has, he pitter-pattered too much. Felt like he didn't have the same holes at time also that we saw from LaShawn Williams, but those two guys are listed as the top two, but we know it goes a lot deeper than that. We saw Moulton last year. We saw a little bit of Washington. Of course, we saw a bunch of Jazzion Patterson, those three guys. Plus, you're bringing in two incoming freshmen this year with Xavier Williams coming in along with Brevin Dahl. So all those guys coming together. What Nuggets have been out there, anticipate maybe seeing a little bit more passes out of the backfield. Now, it can't go lower really than what they've done. Just Iowa, for whatever reason, in the Brian Ferentz offense, never use that. But when you have this kind of depth at the running back spot, these are some of your better athletes and probably better playmakers. Finding ways to get them involved makes a whole lot of sense. So we go out wide. Caleb Brown, the starter on one side, saw certainly his emergence through the back half of last season. A lot of excitement about him. Needs to be more consistent, obviously, catching the football, but we know this is a powerful athlete and something that Iowa just hasn't had a whole lot of at the wide receiver position. Seth Anderson on the other side. It was a disappearing act in the back half of the year from him. Need him to take a big step forward this season. And then a couple of young guys. Jacob Bostic is still only listed as a sophomore. We heard about him in his freshman year, but it's been all about injuries by Bostic. Can he finally put it together? Can he finally stay healthy? Probably the biggest question with him. And then Jared Bowie, redshirt freshman from Florida. He was on the travel team last year. Showed up in a couple of games. We'll see if he can be a guy with a new wide receiver coach. Maybe he takes a step forward this season. And then over at tight end, no surprise there. It's Luke Lachey and Addison Estrenga. Let's go to the offensive line, and this is where the intrigue comes with the departure after not practicing from Caden Proctor. So it's back to Mason Richmond at left tackle. Got to have him healthy. You have to have him as close to 100% as you can have. You go back 2 years ago, he was okay. He was out of an awful offensive line, certainly one of the better ones that season. Took a huge step back last year. Injuries were a big part of that. Over on right tackle, Jennings Dunker. Kirk mentioned that they don't anticipate much movement on that side, that they're going to keep him outside, and those are your tackles for next season. Inside, Logan Jones is listed as the starter at center, though he is injured right now after a surgery and is going to be out for the spring. Tyler Ellsbury will get the snaps. I'm an Ellsbury guy. I believe that the Iowa offensive line was better with him at the center position. I know that the offensive coaches really love Logan Jones, but I do wonder. There's something missing with him. And I'm no guru breaking down offensive line tape, and certainly Kirk Ferentz is that. Just want to see more out of Logan Jones. And then your starters at the guard position. Connor Colby, he was honorable mention all Big Ten last year. You're in good shape there. And then Bo Stevens over at the left guard position, a guy with a bunch of starts in his career. He was banged up last season. Your backups to keep an eye on. Well, we mentioned Ellsbury, obviously, who is a starter right now, at least during spring football. Trevor Lauk, talked about him. I think eventually he needs to be a tackle. I was very short on tackles. He is listed, though, as the backup at the right guard position behind Connor Colby. That's when you definitely need to keep an eye on. And another young guy, Cade Pieper, who showed up at the end of the season last year on the depth chart. A lot of excitement there about him. He's got to get bigger, but really like what they've seen out of Pieper. Still only listed at 255 pounds. Woo. Yeah, we've got some work to do to get that weight up for that young man. Your backups at the tackle positions, Nick DeYoung coming back for another year from him. And your swing guy can play him inside and outside. Hasn't been at a high level, but he's a body. And then Jack Dotzler, kid from sophomore now in the sophomore class. And we'll see on that front. So that's what you have offensively. Yes, they still have a fullback, listed there. Rusty Van Wetzinga is one of the fullbacks. Hayden Large also there. They're also using him a little bit in the H-back role. Over on the defensive side of the football, we talked about the D-line a little bit yesterday. Your starters, Deontay Craig at left end. Inside on the left side is Aaron Graves. Your right tackle is Y.A. Black, and Ethan Herkett. Had some big plays, certainly during his career already, are your starters. The backups, though, Max Llewellyn, we've seen him. Brian Allen, super upside, and now just trying to find a role. Can he be that edge rusher this season? We'll see about that one, and they need to be able to create some pressure on the quarterback. Jeremiah Pittman, we've seen a little bit of him. I've seen maybe glimpses that Pittman at minimum can be our number 3 tackle. And then after that, it's a sophomore from Robbins, Iowa, Luke Gaffney. Can't help you on that one. We go to the linebacker crew, Kyler Fisher, Jackson Rexroth, and of course, with the cash position, Sebastian Castro also listed there. Jay Higgins with Jaden Harrell's his backup. Talked about Harrell yesterday being mentioned a couple of times by Kirk. It's usually good news, and maybe just trying to keep that carrot out there. Hey, stick around for another year. The job's going to be yours next season. And then Carson Shire, another guy, health has been his issue. Defensive backfield, good shape there. Deshaun Lee, we saw a ton of him last year with suspensions and injuries out there at one of the cornerback spots. Jamari Harris back on the other side from him. Wampa and Schulte back as your starting safeties. Entringer, we saw the play, of course, in the Big Ten championship game. Ton of upside. Really excited about his future. And John Nestor shows up on the depth chart again as a backup at the cornerback position, and another one they're excited about. Drew Stevens is listed as your starter at the kicker after losing his job at the end of last season, or at least for the final kick of the year. Oh, kick for points. How about that? We had a couple of kickoffs, but Iowa didn't score in the bowl game. Iowa didn't score in the Big Ten Championship, so we only got to see Drew Stevens kick it off twice after the walk-off winner against Nebraska from the Marshall Meter coming in from Central Michigan in his only field goal attempt. It was a good one. Trip Woody comes in, the freshman, also from Carolina. He is listed as a backup. And then Reese Dakin is your punter, the newest Aussie that'll take over on that spot. So that's what we have right now on the depth chart. I think some good things on there, things to get excited about as we will work to go a little bit deeper into football here throughout the course of spring football. Wrapping things up, getting ready for the Sweet 16 for the women's basketball team. Ice Cube, Caitlin Clark, did you have that on your bingo card? Probably not. We'll tell you about the details as we continue. This is Locked On Hawkeyes. Today's episode of Locked On Hawkeyes is brought to you by Fire TV. Fire TV is your destination for sports, from live games to highlights, in-depth analysis, and a whole lot more. Fire TV offers amazing viewing experiences with smart TVs, as well as the Fire TV stick. You just plug it into your existing TV, and it'll provide access to millions of movies and TV episodes, as well as free and live TV. Whether it's opening weekend of baseball, college basketball tournament, you're going to want to have a Fire TV. Fire TV also recently has created Fire TV channels. They deliver a constant supply of the latest videos from your favorite sports brands, all for free. And that includes all of us right here on Locked On, most of the big pro leagues, college conferences as well. Fire TV channels lets you dive into all the game analysis, highlights, and more to keep up to date on the latest in the world of sports. March Madness, NBA, MLB, and a whole lot more. Not to mention great news, entertainment, videos on everything that you can imagine with Fire TV. Fire TV channels on Fire TV and Alexa devices. You're going to want to you want to take a look at this if you are hooked up with Fire TV. To learn more, just go online, Amazon.com/LockedOnFireTV. That's Amazon.com/LockedOnFireTV. Back with you one final time on the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast. I'm Trent Condon, and thanks for making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every day. So as we wrap things up, Sweet 16 matchup, we will have a full breakdown preview, a lot of numbers, a lot of stats, a lot of information on this Colorado team. We've given you kind of the cursory glance of things, 4 or 5 starters back from a year ago, a team better, I think, than they were a season ago, a team that Iowa was down at the half to, and it was a 5-point game with 5 minutes to go a season ago before Iowa eventually pulled away and got the victory before eventually moving on to the national championship game. So should be a tough one. We'll break things down a little bit deeper with that. But boy, the Caitlin Clark news from today, as we hear that Ice Cube and his Big Three basketball league had offered $5 million to Caitlin Clark to play 10 games this year. Now, this is a publicity stunt. That's what this is. I mean, the reality that this was going to happen is not very high. WNBA season going on, the Olympics season coming up this year with the Summer Olympics, and with it, U.S. basketball, it wasn't going to work. But I did like the response from Ice Cube, where he said didn't want it out while the tournament was still happening, but yes, there have been overtures that were made. Now, do we need a response? We'll get press conferences, I believe, coming up today from out in Albany. And are we going to see at that point there needs to be a response from Caitlin Clark about this? I don't know. I would anticipate that the question is going to be asked. But as we look back and we go back to the victory on Monday night against West Virginia and just looking at Caitlin Clark, she's had so much on her shoulders. There's been so much there. And you do worry about fatigue, not the physical fatigue. And she's put herself in a position with the work that she's done. You hear about the amount of work that she does during the offseason of getting her body ready for a season. It's not the actual physical part of the fatigue. It's the mental part. And everything that you do to not be able to go to the grocery store, not be able to go to class. There was a basketball game a few weeks ago, a men's game, that she shows up and got her hood pulled up tight. So nobody knew who she was. You have those kind of aspects. And I'm sure for a while it's fun, but after a while, you just want to be normal. You just want to have some normalcy. And that is so difficult. And the stories that are out there and national spotlights and the national talking heads and the people that love to shout, those kind of people out there just screaming some ridiculous asinine takes because, well, that's what they do. But dealing with that just constantly, it has to be too much. And you look at the shooting woes that have cropped up for Caitlin in a game where she scores half the points against West Virginia, but there's so much more. A season low in assists, just 3. You got to have teammates to make shots, and that's going to help that out. I'm left wondering. I think the good news is, though, getting away from home and getting away from Carver Hawkeye Arena, the pressure there, the fan base, all those different things, and just going through what she does on a basis that's completely different than anybody else has to deal with. And of getting back on the road and knowing now that this final stretch, if it's 1 game, 2 game, or if it's 4 more games and playing for another national championship, if that's what she needs, just to reset herself. It's a quick turnaround. And a quick turnaround after the Elite Eight into the Final Four. As we remember, a year ago, they went from Seattle right to Dallas. Didn't even get back to Iowa City. I know that's going to be the case again this season. If Iowa does win these next 2 games and does get back to a Final Four, you don't have to go back home. And maybe that's a good thing, just to get away from the bubble. That definitely is Iowa City. That's at least the hope from my perspective. Thanks for making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every day. Greatly appreciate each and every one of you out there for being with us every single day, talking Hawkeyes with you. And that's what we do here on the Locked On Network. Not just the Hawkeyes, whatever your favorite NFL, MLB team with opening day coming up today. My Minnesota Twins in action against the Kansas City Royals. Whatever your team is, you are covered on the Locked On Network every single day. That's what we strive to do. Speaking of those talking heads as well, people screaming all day. You're watching ESPN, you're watching FS1, and you just have to turn down the volume because of all that shouting. Well, it's time for you to make the switch to Locked On Sports Today. It's a free 24/7 sports channel, streaming and programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all that screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Fire TV Channels app. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Check it out. It's Locked On Sports Today. Back with you tomorrow. Again, a full breakdown of everything, and we'll see. Is there going to be more portal news? Maybe some names that are starting to crop up. We'll talk about that. A lot of basketball conversation. Plenty of football still. A couple other topics coming out of the Kirk Ferentz press conference. Want to break down, and we got you covered coming up on the Friday edition. Again, thanks for making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every day. We'll talk to you again tomorrow. Go Hawks!